Assalamualaikum and hi. My name is BATRISYIA IZZATIE from DBS 5A. Today I would like to explain about consideration. Based on section 2D, consideration is referred when one party is agreed to give or promise in exchange for what it is being given or promised from the other side. Consideration is something that has value in the eye of law and becomes the basis of the contract. There are three categories of consideration, which executory, executed, and past consideration. Executed consideration is when a promise is made in return for another promise. Section 2D states that when at the desire of the promiser, the promised or any other person promise to do or to abstain from doing anything. From illustration A to section 24 Contract Act 1950, for example, A agrees to sell his house to B for 10,000. Here, B is promised to pay the sum of 10,000 is the consideration for A promise to sell the house, and A's promise to sell the house is the consideration for B promise to pay for 10,000 ringgit. These are lawful consideration. Second one is executed consideration. Executed consideration is when the promise comes first before the performance. In section 2D provide that when at the desire of the promiser, the promise or any other person does or abstain from doing something. For the example, X promised to pay Rm200 to whoever that find his lost cat. In response to the offer, Y put some effort and finally finds the cat and return it to the X. Y return it to the X. In this situation, the act of Y in finding and returning the handphone is the executed consideration of X promised to pay. Therefore, X promise is a contract. Lastly is past consideration. Past consideration is when the performance comes first before the promise. Section 2D states that when at the desire of the promiser, the promise or any other person has done or abstained from doing something. For the example, Ali asked Abu to find his lost cat. In response to the request, Abu put some effort and finally finds it. When Abu returned it to Ali, the feeling thankful, Ali promised to pay Rm200 to Abu. Ali promise is made in return for the past act of Abu. The past act of Abu is considered as past consideration. Hence, Ali's promise is a contract. Next, I will explain about intention to create legal relation. To make a valid contract, the law requires that the parties to an agreement must have intention to create legal relation. Contract Act is silent as regards what constitutes intention and how it determines if intention exists. To determine whether intention exists or not, the law divides agreement into two classes. The first classes is commercial or business agreement, and the second one is social, domestic, or family agreement. Commercial or business agreement. In commercial or business agreement, the law presumes that intention exists between the party to have the legal relation. Once the party enter into commercial agreement such as a sale and purchase agreement, the law presumes that the party have intention to create legal relations. The contract is therefore binding on the parties unless the parties specify otherwise. Okay, the next one is, if any party wishes that the agreement is not binding, the party must rebut the presumption by evidence or express term. This is normally done by the usage of any express clause in their agreement that their agreement is not be legally binding. For example, using a clause subject or subject to contract or subject to preparation and approval of a formal contract in the agreement. The effect of this clause is that the oral or informal agreement is not binding until the execution of a full or final agreement. One of the case of this legal relation is Win v. Bull. Sorry. In this case, an agreement was made between the plaintiff and the defendant for a lease of a house, subject to the preparation and approval of a formal contract. Since, in this case, no further formal contract was entered into the court, held that there was no enforceable contract. Next is social, domestic, or family agreement. Social, domestic, and family agreement are agreements which are made between friends and family members on certain family or social arrangement. In such an arrangement, the law presumes that there is no intention to create legal relation between the parties. The contract is not binding on the parties as it is presumed by the law that is not intended to have legal consequences in the event any party failed to fulfill his or her obligation. One of the cases that related to social, domestic, or family agreement is Married v. Married 75. It tells that the parties decide to divorce and the husband left the monitorial home which was in the joint name of the husband and the wife. The house was subject to a mortgage. The husband agreed to pay the wife $40 a month, and out of the $40 she would pay the outstanding mortgage payment. The husband agreed that he would transfer the house to the sole ownership of the wife upon completion of the payment. The agreement was recorded in writing on a piece of paper and signed by the husband. Upon completion of the payment, the husband refused to transfer the house to the wife. It was held that in the circumstances for this case, there is a binding contract between the parties had intended to create legal relation by making the agreement in writing and signed by the husband. Accordingly, the house must be transferred to the wife. That's all for me. Thank you.